At my sister's wedding, I watched her smirk as she introduced me to her boss as the unemployed wife who can't keep up. Before I could even answer, her boss glanced at me, smiled, and turned to her with words that stunned the room, saying, "If anyone's losing their job today, it is you, Elena, the unemployed wife who cannot keep up." My sister Chloe's voice echoed through the grand hall of the lakefront estates, each word a carefully polished stone thrown as she presented me to Marcus Thorne, the CEO of the Thorne Financial Group. 200 guests paused their conversations to look our way as she continued, her smile as bright and bubbly as the champagne in her hand. She had so much potential, you know? But now, well, I guess some people just aren't wired for real-world achievement. The glittering crystal chandeliers seemed to cast a spotlight directly on my humiliation, while Marcus Thorne observed my face with a focus that made me stand a little taller. What Chloe did not know, what no one in this room could possibly know, was that I owned 40% of the company she was so proud to work for. It was a stake held through a network of anonymous shell corporations that had dragged Thorne Financial back from the brink of bankruptcy 4 years ago. Marcus's sharp blue eyes met mine for 3 deliberate seconds before he spoke. Elena Miller? The way he articulated my maiden name made Chloe's perfect smile twitch. The Elena Miller from Miller Investments? The champagne flute in Chloe's hand gave a slight tremble. "You know my sister?" "If anyone's losing their job today, it is you," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying into the sudden, shocked silence like a thunderclap in a library. But I am getting ahead of myself. To truly grasp how we got to this moment, with my sister sabotaging her own career at her wedding reception, you need to understand the life I had meticulously built in the shadows for the last 3 years, a life that began this very morning. I woke up at 5 a.m. in our Chicago townhouse, the same way I had every day since leaving my high-profile consulting job. Ryan slept soundly beside me, completely oblivious to the fact that his supposedly unemployed wife was about to dive into the quarterly performance reports for 14 different tech startups. The cool blue light from my laptop screen illuminated stacks of files marked "Confidential Miller Investments" spread across my half of the bed. $30 million in managed assets, all carefully funneled through shell companies and private equity structures that ensured my name appeared on 0 public records. The irony was a constant companion. Just 3 years ago, I was one of the city's most sought-after strategic consultants, my name featured in business journals and my face a regular at industry events. Now I was invisible by choice, and that very invisibility had become my most powerful asset. A notification pinged on my screen. It was an encrypted message from Marcus Thorne. Urgent. Evidence secured on TFG data leak. Full disclosure at today's event. Confirming your attendance. TFG, Thorne Financial Group, was our internal code for the most sensitive corporate intelligence. My stomach clenched as the pieces fell into place. Chloe had direct access to those files. Ryan stirred next to me, and I snapped the laptop shut, sweeping the papers into a hidden compartment I had built into my nightstand. This was our daily routine. My rapid transformation from phantom investor to suburban homemaker in the time it took for him to open his eyes. "Up early again," he murmured, pulling me closer. "Stressed about the wedding?" "Something like that," I replied, letting him hold me while my mind raced, calculating the fallout. If Chloe had breached data security, if she had sold company secrets as I strongly suspected, then today was going to be more than just another round of family humiliation. It was going to be a detonation. By 10 a.m., I was in my home office, what Ryan thought of as my hobby room, surrounded by a bank of monitors displaying real-time stock tickers and investment dashboards. The wedding was not until 4 in the afternoon, but I had to know exactly what Marcus had found. I accessed the internal servers of the firm, a privilege reserved for board members and major stakeholders. And there it was. A trail of unusual access patterns on highly confidential client files, all originating from Chloe's unique login credentials. My phone buzzed. It was Simon, my old partner from my consulting days. "Elena, we have a problem." His voice had that familiar tone of crisis management that I remembered from our all-nighters. "EdgePoint Capital has been quietly shopping around the firm's portfolio data. Someone on the inside is selling your company's secrets. Your company." Even Simon, one of the handful of people who knew the truth about my investments, understood the gravity of the situation. "I am aware," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Are you also aware that your sister just bought an $80,000 Porsche? Paid in cash," my source says. The final puzzle piece clicked into place with a sickening thud. Chloe's recent splurges, her sudden wardrobe of designer labels, the ostentatious diamond earrings she had flaunted at our parents' house last week, all of it was financed by betraying the very firm I had single-handedly resurrected. "Simon, I need you to document everything. Timestamps, dates, transaction amounts. Send it over encrypted. Already on its way. Elena, be careful. If this goes public, it will be a mess." "It will," I interrupted. "Today." After the call, I sat in my office staring at the wall where the original term sheet was framed, concealed behind a landscape painting Ryan had given me for our anniversary. 4 years ago, I wrote a check for $15 million to save a company that was weeks away from total collapse. I had structured the deal through Miller Investments, demanded absolute anonymity, and spent 2 years secretly rebuilding their entire investment strategy. Every success Chloe had bragged about at family dinners, every bonus she had pocketed, every promotion she had celebrated, it was all built on the foundation I had laid, all while she dismissed me as her unemployed, unambitious sister. The personal cruelty would have been one thing, but she had weaponized my supposed failure, using it as a smokescreen for her crimes. Who would ever suspect the rising star of data theft when the leaks appeared random, and the most convenient person to blame was her clueless sister, who supposedly could not balance a checkbook? My laptop chimed again. Another encrypted message from Marcus. "Board has reached a consensus. Full disclosure has been authorized. Your 40% stake will be made public if she proceeds with the planned humiliation. The choice is yours." I stared at his words, fully understanding the power he was handing me. I could stop it all right now, preserve my anonymity, and let Chloe's spiteful performance slide one more time. Or I could let the truth explode at her wedding, in front of every person whose opinion she valued. Ryan knocked on the door. "We should probably start getting ready." "I will be right out," I called back, my fingers poised over the keyboard. I typed my reply to Marcus. "Proceed as we discussed. Let her introduce me exactly as she intends. Then reveal everything." 3 hours later, I stood before our bedroom mirror, smoothing down the simple navy dress I had selected. It was just expensive enough to be appropriate for the occasion, but modest enough to play right into Chloe's narrative of her unsuccessful sister. "But you also look like you are marching into battle." If only he knew. In 2 hours, I would walk into that grand hall and let my sister publicly shame me for the last time. And then, before 200 witnesses, the carefully guarded life I had built in silence would erupt into devastating light. The drive to the estate felt like it stretched for an eternity, filled with Ryan's worried looks and my own thoughts swirling like a gathering storm. 3 weeks. That is all the time that separated me from that moment of calculated vindication. But sitting beside Ryan then, neither of us knew just how explosive that day would be. The wedding invitation was on our kitchen counter when we returned home. Its elegant cream cardstock and gold leaf script a testament to the fortune Chloe had spent. "The pleasure of your company is requested," it read, though pleasure was the furthest thing from what anyone would feel that day. 3 weeks before the wedding, I went to Chloe's high-rise apartment in Lincoln Park to help with the seating arrangements. She had specifically requested my presence, which should have been my first red flag. Chloe never asked for my help with anything she considered important. The doorman gave me a weary smile as he buzzed me in, the kind of look that said he had seen one too many family dramas unfold in these polished hallways. Her apartment was a scene of organized chaos. Bridal magazines littered every surface, and fabric swatches were draped over the furniture. Her dining table was a command center of spreadsheets and guest lists, but my eyes were drawn to the company folders strewn across her desk, pages clearly visible from where I stood. I recognized the distinct blue masthead of their internal reports, and there, plain as day, was the EdgePoint Capital logo on what appeared to be a printed email. "Do not touch anything on the desk," Chloe said, not looking up from her chart. "That is my actual work. Not that you would understand things like quarterly projections or acquisition models." I swallowed the sharp retort that rose in my throat and sat in the chair opposite her. The irony was a burning coal in my stomach, given that I had personally written the framework for the very acquisition models she was apparently leaking to competitors. "So, family tables," she announced, pushing a diagram in my direction. "I am putting you and Ryan at table 18 with the cousins from Milwaukee. It is far enough from the main corporate tables that no one will get stuck making career small talk with you." The casualness of her cruelty was stunning. "Table 18 is next to the kitchen doors." "Exactly. Easy access if you get overwhelmed and need to slip out. You won't have to walk past all the important guests." She made a quick note on her chart, then feigned a look of concern. "I know these big social events with successful people can be a lot when you are between opportunities. I am not between anything, Chloe. Right, my mistake. When you have permanently opted out of the professional world." She returned to her chart. "I have already given the executives a heads up about our family dynamic. Told them you are on an extended sabbatical from the workforce. They were all very understanding. Marcus, especially. He said he respects women who are not afraid to be dependent on their husbands. I knew for a fact Marcus Thorne had said no such thing, but I kept my face a mask of neutrality as I watched her carelessly nudge a folder, revealing more pages. Financial projections, clearly stamped confidential, were covered in handwritten notes with dollar amounts and dates. The evidence of her betrayal was sitting right there, camouflaged by her complete and utter belief in my ignorance. 2 days later, our mother cornered me at the dress fitting. I should have anticipated it when she insisted on coming with me to the boutique, claiming she wanted to help me find something appropriate. The shop was one of those aggressively chic places where the staff spoke in hushed, reverent tones, and the price tags were discreetly tucked away, as if discussing money was a social faux pas. "That one is too plain," my mother, Beverly, declared, waving away the third dress I had tried on. "You need something that projects success, even if it is just borrowed success from Ryan, Mom. Do not mom me, Elena. Do you have any idea how difficult this is for Chloe, having to explain to all her colleagues why her sister with a Harvard MBA is a housewife? The very least you can do is pretend you have some kind of fulfilling life, even if it is just charity work or some part-time consulting." Beverly pulled me aside, away from the prying eyes of the saleswoman. Her voice dropped to the sharp conspiratorial whisper she had honed over decades of suburban politics. "You are jealous of her. You are jealous of her success, and it is painfully obvious. This whole victim act, this refusal to even try, it is embarrassing for the entire family. I am not jealous of Chloe. Then why won't you make an effort? She has worked so hard to build her name at the firm, and you are just going to stand there at her wedding like a monument to wasted potential." Her face was flushed with frustration. "Your father and I did not sacrifice everything to send you to Harvard just for you to become a decorative object in someone else's life." The word sacrifice nearly shattered my composure. They had not sacrificed a thing for my education. I had paid my own way with scholarships and by juggling 3 jobs. And their current financial security, the fact that they still lived in their sprawling Naperville home, was thanks to the anonymous payment I had made on their mortgage last year when my father's medical bills threatened them with foreclosure. But Beverly did not know that. She had never questioned the bank error that had miraculously cleared their debt. Just choose whatever dress you think is best, I said quietly. I will wear it. That evening, another encrypted email from Marcus Thorne arrived. My secure phone buzzed while Ryan and I were having dinner, and I excused myself to my office to read it. Certain truths will come to light at the reception. Be ready for full disclosure. The board is unanimous in their support of the necessary actions. Marcus. I tried to call him, but his longtime assistant, a woman named Linda, answered, her voice unusually strained. Mr. Thorne is in an emergency board meeting all day regarding a security breach. He asked me to tell you, if you called, that everything is documented and the timeline is locked. Linda, what breach? I am not at liberty to discuss the details, but it pertains to the unauthorized distribution of portfolio intelligence. Mr. Thorne wanted to assure you that your interests are being protected. My interests, my 40% stake. My sister's betrayal was no longer a suspicion. It was now a confirmed, high-level corporate crisis. The rehearsal dinner at the North Shore Club the next night was Chloe's masterpiece of orchestrated humiliation. She had seated me specifically where her work friends could see me while she held court at the head table. The private room looked out over Lake Michigan, and the setting sun bathed everything in a golden light, including my sister's perfectly coiffed hair as she entertained her bridesmaids with family anecdotes. The hilarious thing about Elena, she said, her voice loud enough for the neighboring tables to overhear, is that she genuinely thinks gardening is a career, as if growing tomatoes is the same as growing $1 billion portfolio. The bridesmaids tittered nervously, their eyes flicking toward me. I told Marcus about it, and he said it sounded therapeutic, which is corporate speak for at least she is not doing absolutely nothing. Ryan's hand found mine under the table, his thumb tracing circles on my knuckles in a gesture of silent solidarity. He had mastered the art of being present without intervening, knowing my family's dynamics were a minefield he could not navigate for me. Remember when she tried to apply for a job at a local coffee shop? The whine amplifying her voice. Even they told her she was overqualified. Can you imagine failing so hard that even a barista job won't hire you? I had never applied for such a job. The story was pure fiction, crafted to paint me as pathetic and desperate. But her audience did not know that, and I could feel their collective pity and secondhand embarrassment radiating across the room. That is when I saw him. Marcus Thorne was sitting at a corner table with 2 other board members, his face unreadable as he watched Chloe's performance. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second, and he gave the slightest lift of his water glass. The night after the rehearsal dinner was a blur of restless thoughts. Ryan's steady breathing was the only constant as I stared at the hotel room's ceiling, replaying Marcus's inscrutable expression and the immense weight of what was set to unfold in just a few hours. At 5:30 in the morning, a soft knock broke the silence. I opened the door to find Chloe in the hallway, still in her silk pajamas with a hotel robe tossed over them. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. She held a coffee cup like a white flag. "Can I come in?" Her voice was a shadow of the one from the night before, hesitant and small. Ryan mumbled in his sleep as I slipped into the hallway, pulling the door quietly shut behind me. The corridor was empty, its plush burgundy carpet swallowing our footsteps as she led me to a small seating area by a window. "About last night," she started, fidgeting with the cup. I was on edge. The wine, the pressure. I said some things I didn't mean. I waited, knowing the real reason for her visit was still coming. There always was with Chloe. "You know I don't actually think you are a failure, right?" She looked at me, her eyes wide with what seemed like genuine concern. "It is just, everyone expects me to be entertaining, to have stories, and talking about family is just easy." "Easy," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "You know what I mean? It is not like you care what those people think anyway. You have never given a damn about corporate ladders or networking. That is why you left consulting in the first place." She reached out and touched my hand for a fleeting moment. I actually envy that about you. The freedom to just not play the game. It was a classic Chloe apology, wrapped in self-justification and somehow still framing my life choices as a surrender rather than a strategy. But I nodded, letting her think I had bought it. "I need to borrow your pearl necklace," she said, the shift in topics so seamless it was almost an art form. "The one Grandma left you, for my something borrowed." The pearls were in my room's safe, a perfect strand of Mikimoto pearls our grandmother had worn at her own wedding. They were the one truly valuable thing she had owned, and she had left them to me, the granddaughter who shared her middle name. "Of course," I said, though a cold knot formed in my stomach. "At least you can contribute something beautiful to my day, even if you cannot contribute to your own success. These pearls will look 1,000 times better in photos than anything I could buy." And there it was, the knife wrapped in silk. The insult disguised as a compliment. Even her apologies were just another performance, scripted to maintain her sense of superiority while making her seem gracious. I retrieved the pearls and watched as she fastened them around her neck, their soft luster catching the first rays of morning light through the window. "Perfect," she breathed, admiring her reflection in her phone's screen. "Now, I have to go. The glam squad gets here at 7. By 3 p.m., the lakefront estates had been transformed into a corporate fairy tale. White roses and gold leaf accents adorned every surface. A string quartet was warming up, and enough champagne was on ice to float a small boat. I found my assigned seat at table 18, grateful that Ryan was still parking the car and would miss the initial indignity of our placement. The ceremony space filled up quickly. I recognized faces from the firm's annual reports, board members, senior partners, the kind of people whose daily decisions moved millions of dollars. Marcus Thorne sat in the third row, flanked by two women I knew as Jasmine Lee and Anita Sharma, both board members with fearsome reputations in the business world. The music swelled and everyone rose as Chloe appeared at the end of the aisle. She was breathtaking in her designer gown, our grandmother's pearls gleaming against her skin. As she passed Marcus's row, I saw his assistant, Linda, discreetly hand him a manila folder. His expression tightened as he glanced at its contents, and then his eyes found mine across the room. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The evidence was now complete. The ceremony itself was a bizarre study in hypocrisy. Chloe recited vows about honesty and transparency, while wearing pearls she had acquired through emotional manipulation. She promised partnership and support to her new husband, Tyler, after spending years systematically undermining her own sister. When she said the words "for better or for worse," I wondered if she had any inkling that worse was about to make a grand entrance at her reception. The cocktail hour started normally enough, a swirl of congratulations and polite chatter, but Chloe quickly turned it into her personal stage, a one-woman show about success and failure with me cast as her favorite prop. She led a group of executives past my table, gesturing vaguely in my direction while speaking just loudly enough for me to hear. "That is my sister, Elena. She is the cautionary tale I tell all our new associates. Harvard MBA, top of her class. And now, well, you see. Her husband is wonderful, though. This is what happens when brilliant women leave the game. They become footnotes in someone else's story." The executives chuckled uncomfortably, a few of them glancing at me with a mix of pity and embarrassment. One younger woman looked like she wanted to object, but Chloe simply talked over her. "No, it is an important lesson. She is the reason I work 80-hour weeks. The sheer terror of becoming another wife who lost her edge, who let her intellect atrophy while planning dinner parties. What Chloe did not know was that 3 of the women in that group, Sophia Wu, Maya Kapoor, and Gabriela Rivera, all ran companies that were thriving because of my silent investments. Sophia's biotech firm had been days from collapse before I injected $2 million in bridge funding. Maya's sustainable fashion brand had gone national using a strategic plan I had authored. Gabriella's education tech company had just closed a Series B funding round that I orchestrated entirely from behind the scenes. They exchanged subtle glances, clearly recognizing my name and struggling to reconcile Chloe's story with the powerhouse investor they knew. Sophia started to say something, but I caught her eye and gave a slight shake of my head. Not yet. Chloe moved on to another cluster of guests, this time a group of male executives from competing firms. The saddest part about my sister, she said, now armed with a fresh glass of champagne, is that she used to be a contender, but she just could not handle the pressure. Some people are not built for the big leagues. Ryan had returned and was now sitting beside me, his hand resting on my knee under the table. "How are you so calm?" he whispered. "Because in about 5 minutes," I said softly, "none of this will matter." That is when I saw Marcus Thorne walking toward our table. He moved with the deliberate, unhurried pace of a man about to close a major deal. The manila folder was still in his hand, and his expression had shifted from polite wedding guest to something I recognized from high-stakes boardrooms. It was the look of a man about to execute a hostile takeover. Chloe saw him approaching and her face lit up, grabbing his arm as he passed. Marcus! Perfect timing. I was just giving everyone the family backstory. You have to meet my sister Elena, the unemployed wife who cannot keep up. The words hung in the air, sharp and clear. Several conversations faltered. The string quartet seemed to miss a beat. Marcus looked down at Chloe's hand on his arm, then at her beaming face, and finally at me. Marcus's eyes held mine for a long moment before he slowly, deliberately removed Chloe's hand from his arm. The gesture was gentle but had an air of finality, like closing a book that would never be read again. Around us, the wedding guests sensed a shift in the atmosphere, their chatter dying down as they turned to watch the unfolding drama. "Elena Miller," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the now silent hall as he used my maiden name with purpose. The Elena Miller from Miller Investments. The champagne glass in Chloe's hand began to shake. "What are you talking about? She does not have any investments. She does not even have a bank account in her own name." Marcus turned to the growing audience, his voice taking on the authoritative tone I knew from virtual board meetings I had attended anonymously. 4 years ago, Thorne Financial Group was 3 weeks from being dismantled. Our investors had abandoned us. We were preparing to declare bankruptcy. The tremor in Chloe's hand grew more violent until the crystal flute slipped from her grasp, shattering on the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. Champagne soaked the hem of her designer gown, but she did not flinch, frozen as Marcus continued. Elena Miller wrote a check for $15 million. She did not ask for recognition, she did not want a board seat, and she refused all press. She just wanted to fix the company quietly and strategically and then step back into the shadows. She owns 40% of the firm. She is our majority shareholder. Our mother, Beverly, had been making her way toward us, no doubt to intervene in what she thought was just another family squabble. Her face cycled through a series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and then back to utter confusion. Behind her, my father, George, had stopped dead in his tracks. And for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of understanding dawn in his eyes. "That is impossible." Chloe's voice was a ragged crack. "She does not understand corporate finance. She cannot even balance a budget." "Tell them, Elena. Tell them this is some kind of sick joke." Marcus pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen with practiced efficiency. "Would you like me to show you the incorporation documents for Miller Investments, the wire transfer confirmations? Or perhaps the strategic restructuring plan she authored that turned us from a failing fund into the city's leading venture capital firm?" He angled the screen toward Chloe, and I watched the blood drain from her face as she saw her entire reality disintegrate. With every swipe of Marcus's thumb, another document appeared, another piece of proof, another nail in the coffin of her condescending narrative. "The Morrison acquisition you took credit for last quarter?" Marcus pressed on, his voice hardening. Elena identified that target, the portfolio optimization that won you your bonus. That was her algorithm. The strategic pivot that saved 12 of our startups from going under? Her plan submitted through encrypted channels you were never even aware of. Jasmine Lee, one of the board members, had moved closer, her corporate instincts on high alert. Marcus, are you saying that Chloe has been taking credit for her sister's work? No, Marcus said, and for a split second, Chloe's face flickered with a desperate hope. Then he delivered the final blow. I am saying she has been taking credit for her sister's work while simultaneously selling our company's most confidential data to our competitors. The room erupted. Guests were pulling out their phones, some openly recording, others texting furiously. I heard someone mutter the name Bloomberg, another tech crunch. The photographer, hired to capture wedding memories, had switched into a photojournalist, his camera clicking away as he documented the implosion of what was now a major corporate scandal. Marcus opened the manila folder Linda had given him. In here are emails from Chloe's corporate account to EdgePoint Capital and 3 other rival firms. She has been selling our portfolio data, our strategic roadmaps, our acquisition targets. The total estimated damages are north of $30 million. He pulled out a printed email and read from it. Quote, attached are the Q3 projections. Do not worry about the source. My unemployed sister helps me with filing sometimes. She would not know what she was looking at even if she saw it. If anything gets traced back, she is the perfect person to take the fall. My stomach lurched. It was not just cruelty. She had been actively setting me up, using my manufactured incompetence as a shield for her own criminality. All those times she had left sensitive documents out in the open, she was not just being careless. She was testing me. I want a lawyer, Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible. You will need several, Anita Sharma, the other board member, stated, stepping forward. Securities fraud, corporate espionage, breach of fiduciary duty. The list is going to be long. Tyler, who had been standing there like a statue, finally found his voice. Chloe, what is going on? What did you do? She turned to him, mascara carving black trails down her cheeks, our grandmother's pearls at her throat looking like a string of accusations. I was trying to secure our future. The market is volatile. I needed a safety net. A safety net? Tyler took a step back from her. You committed federal crimes for a safety net? Marcus cleared his throat, commanding the room's attention once more. Chloe Hayes, effective immediately. Your employment with Thorne Financial Group is terminated. Security will escort you to your desk on Monday to collect your personal belongings. Any attempt to access company systems or contact clients will be considered a breach of your non-compete agreement and will be met with further legal action. You cannot fire me at my own wedding. Chloe's voice rose to a hysterical shriek. This is insane. Elena, tell them to stop. You are my sister. Every eye in the room swiveled to me. 200 guests, including journalists, board members, entrepreneurs I had secretly bankrolled, and family members who had written me off for years, all waiting to see what I would do. Beverly pushed her way through the crowd, her face a mask of indignation. This is completely unacceptable. Whatever corporate nonsense you people are dealing with, this is a family celebration. You cannot destroy my daughter's wedding over a business dispute. Your daughter destroyed her own wedding, Jasmine Lee said coolly. She destroyed it the moment she decided to commit felonies and use her own sister as a scapegoat. The photographer's shutter clicked again as my father finally spoke, his voice carrying a weight I hadn't heard in a decade. Beverly, stop. Just look at what is in front of you. Elena owns the company. She's been supporting us this whole time. The truth hung in the air as my mother processed it, her entire worldview visibly cracking. Around us, the reception had morphed into something between a crime scene and a press conference. Someone had started a live stream. The string quartet had packed up and left. Ryan stood beside me, his presence a silent, solid anchor. I felt the weight of 3 years of secrecy begin to lift, replaced by a feeling I hadn't anticipated. It was not triumph or revenge, but a profound sadness for the sister who had valued the appearance of success so much that she had lost everything in her desperate attempt to steal it. The sadness I felt for Chloe solidified into action as I reached into my clutch and retrieved the envelope I had prepared 3 weeks ago. This was long before this public implosion, long before her calculated cruelty at the rehearsal dinner, back when I still held out hope that my sister was merely ambitious, not corrupt. The cream-colored envelope was addressed in my careful script, Mr. and Mrs. Tyler Hayes. The crowd seemed to lean in as one as I stepped toward Chloe, who had collapsed into a chair someone had provided. Her wedding dress pooled around her in waves of ivory satin, and the pearls at her throat seemed to glow as she looked up at me. Her eyes, a mixture of fear, confusion, and what might have been the first glint of true remorse. "This was always meant for you," I said, my voice steady in the hushed room as I held out the envelope. "A wedding gift. I wrote the check 3 weeks ago." She stared at it as if it were on fire, making no move to take it. Tyler reached for it instead, his hands surprisingly steady. He opened it, and I watched his eyes widen as he read the amount. $25,000, he said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. The words rippled through the onlookers in a series of whispers and gasps, but this silence was different. It was softer, tinged with a sense of bewilderment. Chloe's tears, which had been a steady stream since Marcus's announcement, intensified. Her perfect makeup now ran in dark rivulets as she processed the meaning. I had intended to give her this money before the public shaming, before she called me a failure, before any of this had happened. The generosity had been planned before the cruelty was revealed, and that simple truth seemed to shatter something inside her. "Why?" she whispered, finally taking the check from Tyler with trembling fingers. "After everything I did, everything I said, why would you give me this?" Before I could form a response, Beverly pushed through the remaining crowd, her face flushed with a new kind of rage. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "How dare you?" she hissed, though her voice carried easily. "You planned this. You waited until her wedding day to ruin her. You have been hiding your success all this time, just so you could humiliate her when it would hurt the most." I gently pried her hand off my arm and reached into my clutch again, pulling out my phone. "Mom, I need you to see something. I don't want to see anything from you. You have destroyed your sister's life out of pure jealousy. Beverly, please, just look." My voice remained calm as I opened my banking app to a series of screenshots I had prepared, knowing this moment might come. January 2021, mortgage payment to First National Bank, account ending in 4782. That is your mortgage. March 2021, payment to Northwestern Memorial Hospital for George Miller. That was Dad's heart surgery. My mother's face went ashen as I kept scrolling. Monthly grocery deliveries for the last 2 years, paid from an anonymous account. The new roof you thought your insurance covered. The car repairs Dad could not explain. The country club dues you thought were a billing error. She staggered back, and my father caught her, steadying her. His expression had shifted from confusion to a deep, humbling shame. "It was you?" he said quietly. "The whole time, it was you. You have been paying our bills while we sat at dinner and mocked your life choices," Beverly said, her voice breaking. "While I told everyone you were wasting your life, you were paying for it." The crowd around us now included nearly every remaining guest. Phones were still out, but the atmosphere had changed from scandalous to something far more profound. This was no longer just about corporate crime or a family feud. It had become a public reckoning with assumptions, with the very definition of success. Marcus cleared his throat, pulling the focus back to the business at hand. Given the circumstances, the board would normally pursue full prosecution. Chloe flinched, and Tyler's arm tightened around her. "However," Marcus continued, glancing at his fellow board members, who all nodded, "if Elena is willing to propose an alternative, We will consider it." All eyes were on me again. The power dynamic in the room had completely inverted. Hours ago, I was the family failure at the reject table. Now I held my sister's entire future in my hands. 6 months of community service, I said, my voice even despite the emotional storm inside me, specifically with organizations that help unemployed women get back into the workforce, mandatory professional coaching on ethics and unconscious bias, and full restitution for all damages caused by the data leak, paid back over time. One more condition, I added, and my tone made her freeze. No social media, no LinkedIn posts about your journey of personal growth, no Instagram stories about giving back. You do not get to use this as a redemption arc for professional gain. You do the work because it is the right thing to do, not because you want to repair your reputation. Jasmine Lee spoke up. That seems more than fair. It is transformative justice, not just punitive. I will do it, Chloe said, her voice stronger than it had been all evening, not just because I have to, but because I need to. I need to understand how I became the person who could do what I did. A collective sigh of relief seemed to pass through the room. The crisis was not over. There would be legal papers, professional consequences, and personal reckonings ahead. But a path forward had been laid, one that led toward rebuilding rather than pure destruction. As Ryan and I made our way to the exit, the crowd parted for us. Some looked at me with a newfound respect, others with awe, and a few with what looked like fear. The woman they had pitied had turned out to be the hidden power behind the throne, and that single revelation had upended their entire understanding of success. Ryan's hand found mine as we reached the parking lot, his fingers lacing with mine in that familiar, grounding way. Once we were away from the lights and the lingering guests, he finally spoke. "I have known about Miller Investments for 2 years," he said quietly. "I found some papers you forgot to lock up one night, did some digging, and connected the dots." I stopped walking, turning to face him in the dim light. "You knew? All this time? I knew you would tell me when you were ready, or you would not. Either way, I married Elena, not Miller Investments. I fell in love with the woman who grows heirloom tomatoes and reads philosophy and makes me laugh, not the silent partner with a massive portfolio." As we drove away from the lakefront estates, I watched the venue shrink in the rearview mirror. With it went 3 years of guarded silence and a lifetime of family dynamics that would never be the same. The drive home through the evening glow of the city gave me time to process the explosion of the last few hours. Ryan kept the radio off, a silent understanding that I needed the quiet. Each mile put more distance between us and the wreckage of Chloe's wedding reception, moving us toward whatever came next. 3 months went by before I heard any real news about Chloe. A letter arrived on a crisp September morning, bearing the logo of the Chicago Women's Employment Initiative. I almost tossed it aside as a donation request, but the handwritten address gave me pause. The director, a woman named Patricia Williams, had written to me personally. Her script was careful and deliberate, the handwriting of someone who understood the power of words. She wrote that Chloe had shown up for her first volunteer shift, expecting to be dismissed, dressed in designer clothes that were wholly inappropriate for the work. By her 3rd week, she was in jeans and bringing coffee for the whole staff. Patricia highlighted one incident in particular. A former marketing executive named Sarah had been unemployed for 3 years after her company went under. She had sent out over 200 applications without a single offer, and her confidence was completely gone. Chloe had spent an entire day with her, revamping her resume, running mock interviews, and, most importantly, helping her see that a gap in employment was not a personal failing. According to the letter, Chloe had told Sarah something that made the director take note. "Being unemployed does not make you worthless. My sister taught me that the hard way. She was invisible by choice, building an empire while everyone, including me, thought she was failing. Sometimes the most successful people are the ones you cannot see at all." I put the letter down and went out to my small garden, where the late summer tomatoes were at their peak. I thought about invisibility and choice, about the different ways people can disappear and the reasons they might choose to do so. 3 more months passed before Chloe called. It was a warm December day, and I was reviewing year-end reports when an unfamiliar number flashed on my screen. "Elena, it is me, Chloe." Her voice was different, stripped of the polished, performative confidence that had been her signature. "Would you meet me? For coffee?" There's a quiet place on Division Street called Roots. I knew the place. It was small and unassuming, serving honest coffee without any pretense. It was not the kind of place the old Chloe would have ever set foot in. She was already there when I arrived, tucked into a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a simple ceramic mug. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she was wearing a soft gray cashmere sweater I recognized from our college days, a gift from our grandmother. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. "I was not sure you would." "I was not sure either," I admitted. We sat in silence for a moment before she started speaking, her words slow and deliberate. The data selling, it started small, just little bits of market intelligence that seemed harmless, things that would be public soon anyway. She stared into her coffee, but then it became more than just money. It was about having a safety net, about making sure I had value outside of the firm. Because what if they found out I was not as brilliant as they all thought? What if they realized half my big ideas were just lucky guesses? "You were afraid," I said. "Terrified," she corrected, finally meeting my eyes. Every single day I walked into that office expecting to be exposed as a fraud. So I created an actual fraud to cover up the fraud I only imagined I was. The irony is not lost on me. But the worst part, she said, her voice cracking, was using you. Assuming you were too simple to notice, too unsuccessful to matter. I measured everyone's worth by how visible they were, never stopping to think that the invisible people might be the ones holding everything up. For the first time in our adult lives, I felt like I was seeing my real sister. Not the ambitious corporate climber, but the scared person underneath who had built her armor out of achievements and her weapons out of other people's perceived failures. Thanksgiving arrived 2 weeks later, and the family dinner was a case study in shifting dynamics. Beverly had abandoned her usual seating chart, the one that always placed the most successful family members near the head of the table. Instead, we were all mixed together. When she asked about my work, she actually listened, without trying to reframe it or quickly change the subject. My father surprised everyone by admitting he had suspected something for years. That mortgage payment in 2019, he said, carving the turkey. The bank told us it was an error in our favor, but I knew. Banks do not make $60,000 errors in your favor. I figured it was you, Elena, but I could not prove it, and I did not want to risk asking and being wrong. Beverly looked at him, stunned. "You knew, and you never told me?" "Some gifts are meant to be invisible," he replied, with a small glance in my direction. "The best ones do not ask for a thank you." After dinner, Chloe pulled me aside. She showed me a meticulously organized spreadsheet on her phone, documenting 400 hours of volunteer work, double what the board had required. Each entry had names, dates, and notes on the women she had helped. "I am thinking of starting my own thing," she said quietly, "a consulting firm for women with non-traditional career paths. Not a placement agency, but strategy consulting for people whose resumes do not fit the standard mold." "I could help you fund it," I offered. No, the word was immediate and firm. "I need to build this from the ground up. No shortcuts, no silent partners. You taught me that real success can afford to be quiet. Now I need to learn if I can build something genuine, something that exists because of what I create, not what I take." I watched her walk away, her phone clutched in her hand, those 400 hours representing something far more valuable than time served. Winter settled over the city with a fierce grip that year, and I found myself thinking about transformation, about how ice can either preserve or destroy, all depending on what lies beneath when the thaw finally comes. A year after the wedding, my phone rang on a quiet March afternoon. It was Chloe. This time, her voice was full of genuine excitement. "We got it," she said without any preamble. "Morrison Industries just signed with us. They want us to design their entire women's re-entry program. And not because of who I know. They found us through our work with the initiative. They chose us on merit. Morrison Industries was a huge deal. This contract would legitimize her new firm. I used the wedding gift as seed money," she continued, the words tumbling out. "Every cent went into legal fees, operating costs, building the website. But Elena, I am paying it back. With interest. The first check is in the mail. You do not have to do that." "I do," she interrupted. "Money without respect is just paper. You taught me that. But I need to prove, mostly to myself, that I can build something that generates both." The next week, a check for $5,000 arrived with a handwritten note. First of many. Building something real takes time, but some debts cannot wait. It was the start of a monthly ritual. Each payment came with updates on the women her firm was helping. That same month, Marcus Thorne called with an unusual proposition. The annual investor meeting was coming up, and for the first time, he wanted me to attend in person. I had always participated via encrypted video link, maintaining the firewall between Elena the person and Miller Investments the entity. I sat in the back of the new boardroom, still preferring the shadows, as Marcus called the meeting to order. Halfway through, he went off script. "Before we continue, I want to acknowledge someone who has been fundamental to our success, but has never once sought recognition." The room turned as he gestured toward me. Elena Miller saved this company 4 years ago, but that is not the full story. Her strategic guidance prevented dozens of layoffs. Her interventions saved countless startups our metrics would have written off. She saw potential where others saw only problems, and she did it all without asking for a single headline. The applause felt different. These people understood the value of strategic silence. As I stood to acknowledge them, I realized that visibility was not the enemy. It just should not be a prerequisite for validity. 2 months later, Chloe called with another request. Her firm was hosting a workshop for women re-entering the workforce, and she wanted me to speak, not as an investor or a consultant, but as someone who had chosen invisibility and found power in it. The workshop was in a community center on the south side, a deliberate choice. 23 women sat in folding chairs, their stories written in the careful, hopeful way they held themselves. Chloe stood at the front to introduce me, her voice clear and without any of its old performative flair. "I want you to meet my sister, Elena, who taught me that success has many faces, most of them quiet." As she spoke, I felt the last remnants of my anger dissolve. Her cruelty had not been born of malice, but of a deep, gnawing fear, of being invisible, of being irrelevant, of becoming the very failure she projected onto me. My talk was about strategic invisibility. I told them about leaving my high-profile job not because I had failed, but because I had succeeded enough to know that version of success was not what I wanted. I explained how quiet influence could often achieve more than public authority. Afterwards, a woman named Diane approached me. She had been a CFO before leaving work to care for her mother. 5 years later, she could not get an interview because of the gap on her resume. "You are saying the gap is not a weakness?" she asked. "I am saying the gap is data," I replied. "It shows you can prioritize something other than a career. The wrong company will see that as a liability. The right one will see it as proof of your character." That evening, our family gathered for dinner at my parents' house. It had become a monthly tradition. Beverly was now volunteering at the Employment Initiative, teaching interview skills. "I have been working with a woman who reminds me of myself," she said, "except she is honest about her struggles. Made me realize I never told you girls that I wanted to work when you were young. Your father and I decided I should stay home, and I spent 20 years pretending it was my dream, not my compromise. My father, inspired by her honesty, made his own confession. I retired early because of burnout, not because we were financially set. I just could not face another day of pretending to care about quarterly reports. But I was too ashamed to admit it. In that moment, we were not just a family. We were co-conspirators in the project of redefining what it meant to be successful. The transformation of our family did not happen overnight, despite its dramatic beginning. 2 years after Chloe's wedding, she invited me to her company's anniversary party. "It is nothing big," she said over the phone, "just some clients and colleagues at my apartment. But I need you there." The party was intentionally small. About 15 women were gathered in her living room, which now felt like a home, not a showroom. As the sun set over the city, Chloe stood to speak, her voice quiet but firm. 2 years ago, I destroyed my own wedding with my arrogance and cruelty, she began. My sister Elena was there, and I introduced her to my boss as an unemployed failure. What I did not know was that she owned 40% of the company I worked for. She found my eyes across the room. But that is not the real story. The real story is that Elena taught me the difference between a spotlight and illumination. She chose to be the light itself, not just stand in it. And her light helped countless people find their way, including me. The room was filled with a warm, understanding quiet. 6 months later, Chloe gave birth to a daughter. She called me from the hospital in the middle of the night, exhausted but euphoric. Her name is Grace, she said, just for the concept itself. When I visited them, she was sitting by the window, holding the tiny sleeping baby. "I want to raise her differently," Chloe said. "To value kindness over career ladders, substance over visibility." She looked up at me, her eyes completely vulnerable. "I want you to be her godmother. I want her to learn early what took me 30 years to understand, that your worth is not measured by LinkedIn endorsements or how many people know your name." When I held baby Grace, her impossibly small fingers wrapped around my thumb, and I thought about the world she was entering, one where her mother now understood that invisible support could be more powerful than public accolades. That winter, Marcus Thorne made me an offer. We met in his office, the city blanketed in snow below us. He pushed a folder across the desk, a buyout proposal for my stake in the firm, $60 million, triple your initial investment. You could walk away, truly disappear. The number was breathtaking. It was a clean exit, the final step toward complete invisibility. "I have a counteroffer," I said, closing the folder. "I keep my stake, but we use it to establish a new fund, a fund specifically for women choosing non-traditional career paths, strategic investment in alternative definitions of success." Marcus leaned back, a smile playing on his lips. "Let me guess. You want to run it anonymously?" "Actually, no," I said, surprising us both. "This one needs to be visible, not for me, but for the other women who need to see that choosing a different path is not failure. It is just different lighting." We announced the fund at the next investor meeting. Chloe was my guest, and when the announcement was made, she stood up. "I want to be the first donor," she said, her voice steady. "I owe a debt to every woman I dismissed as unemployed when they were just undefined. This is how I start to pay it back." Her donation was every dollar of profit from her firm's first year. It was a gesture that moved beyond apology and into action. Now, on this quiet Sunday morning, I am kneeling in my garden. Ryan is reading on the patio. Chloe brought Grace over, and the toddler is carefully studying a tomato plant. She looks up at me, her eyes her mother's, but without the judgment. "Pretty," she says, pointing at a green tomato. "It will be," I tell her. "Sometimes the best things take time to show their true colors." Chloe is watching her daughter, and I see a peace in her face I never thought possible. The revenge I thought I wanted at her wedding was never the point. Revelation was. Pulling back the curtain not to destroy, but to illuminate. Watching my sister teach her daughter that helping others up is more important than standing above them, I know that this transformation is the ultimate success. True success does not need a spotlight. Like the strongest light, it does not have to announce itself, because its effects are visible everywhere it touches. If this story of corporate revenge and family redemption had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Marcus revealed Elena's 40% ownership at the wedding reception, watching Chloe's champagne glass shatter as her world crumbled. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Do not miss more thrilling stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. The end of the story.